BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going to be talking all about Nancy Grace, and this is going to be kind of coming at things in a little bit of a different angle for some of the things on this channel. Nancy Grace, I noticed, is really quite of a different personality in the true crime world. And, most people associate HLN and Court TV with the name Nancy Grace, but it's like, when it comes to true crime, she covers an enormous amount of high-profile cases. But the thing is, though, she's not just a commentator, she's not just someone on television. She's a former practicing attorney, she's a former prosecutor herself, and also she has a first-hand connection to this, being the kind of a survivor of an attack, and like having that sort of first-hand connection of having a fiance that was murdered back when she was, I believe, in her college days. So the thing is, though, what do we really make of Nancy Grace? Is she a friend or enemy to the true crime world? Because I think that there is a very big thing to say about the way that she presents cases and the way that she talks about them versus some of the other commentators out there, and especially the commentators on YouTube and just the internet in general. Like when you're talking about true crime cases with people, and even if you use the things like forums where you're reading the comment sections of other videos and such, there really is an enormous difference between the way most people see true crime and the way that somebody like Nancy Grace is covering them. And I think there's a very important reason for that. And a lot of it stems from her background as a prosecutor. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson, but the first time I ever heard Neil deGrasse Tyson, it was during his famous bit about lawyers, talking about how many politicians become lawyers, and they become lawyers by practicing on the debate team, and you learn which side of the issue that you're going to debate 15 minutes before, and it's about playing the different sides of the issues. And when I hear Nancy Grace talking about that stuff, like whether it's on her podcast, which I've only heard really like just a handful of episodes, but she does have that true crime podcast out there, whether it's on the podcast or on the HLN stuff, I mean, the way I hear her talking about true crime, it's that exact same way. It's like the debate team. And I can't think of any other better way to put it. She has chosen a side, and she just plays that side. And it's like she's arguing her side of the case, the way that a prosecuting attorney would do that. But the thing is, though, when it comes to true crime, this is not the court of law. This is not just like the whole thing about you got to represent your client and you got to represent the state and you got to just be trying to win the case at all costs. That whole thing about the gray area of subverting the law to your advantage. No, true crime is about getting to the truth no matter what. It's not about just playing the different sides of the issues. So I think that that's a very kind of almost impractical mechanism to use in the true crime approach. And definitely on her podcast and such, she has that guy that's like the co-host who does her research that she just starts yelling at from time to time. And that's the big thing about the Nancy Grace personality. It's just very exuberant, very outgoing in a bad way. Lots of just sort of brattiness in some ways, and she gets mad because people don't use words like your analysis and in wrong context and stuff. No, I don't know the name of her co-host. I'll probably have to Google it. Also going to Google the other guy in Wham coming up. But the thing is that when you have that approach, I've heard her get really mad, though, because he was kind of talking about a person involved with a missing persons case who had a history of drug use. And then Nancy just flips out and starts shouting at him, that is not admissible in a court of law. But the thing is, though, when you're discussing a true crime case, the ambition is not to talk about whether or not something is admissible in a court of law, it's to get the truth. I'm not a lawyer, and most of the people that I talk to and that I'm getting the comments, coming in from you guys, are also not lawyers. It's about trying to find out what happened. When someone has a much larger audience than I do, I can really kind of comprehend about why they're going to get away from speculation. Usually there's just a little bit of theorizing and speculation thrown in at the end. And I've kind of learned firsthand, when you just throw out theories about maybe even what you genuinely believe happened, it makes a lot of people angry when you're just talking about theories and such. And it also, you're also going to be wrong a lot of the time. And I know that. I know that now. It's like when we're talking about true crime theories on the internet, it's not even about, at this point, trying to get your theory to be 100% correct. It's going to be trying just to kind of get down the right pathway and just trying to get in the right direction. And something that can kind of slow you down is if you were talking to somebody about a true crime case and then they tell you, yeah, but that's not admissible in a court of law. So I'm like, well, now wait a second. I mean, we really need to figure out what happened first. I mean, before we even talk about what's admissible and what's inadmissible, who is the perpetrator? What did they do? What happened? Or in the case of a missing persons case, where is the person that we're looking for? And then the lawyers can sort out their arguments later on. But first and foremost, though, I'd say that there are almost a few kind of roadblocks in the way of Nancy Grace, for lack of a better term, when it comes to be getting the truth. And I think that that's something that perhaps could be holding back her sort of presentation, most particularly on the True Crime podcast. I've only ever used it for cases where it's like, I really felt that maybe it was somewhat lesser known and I just wanted to hear a different perspective on it. But I would say, though, she did do one on the Missy Beavers case. I forget if that was a True Crime podcast or I think that was actually something that she did for HLN covering Missy Beavers. And, in all seriousness, when you have a case like that, though, in terms of asking the question, friend or enemy, it's good to bring something like that to the national stage. It's good to have those talks on the national level. Because the issue with the Missy Beavers case is, I mean, once you present that to an enormous amount of people, maybe somebody could figure it out. And maybe someone could actually kind of solve that one. And that is something that absolutely needs to be solved. But you know what we're going to do? Like, to have a little bit of a pivot. You cannot have a conversation about Nancy Grace and the ethics of true crime without mentioning somebody named Casey Anthony. Because the biggest things that we had to deal with Nancy Grace during that time was she saw an explosion of ratings during the Casey Anthony trial, talking about Tot Mom. How did this mother potentially murdered her daughter and such? But the thing is, though, before we really learned all the facts about that, Nancy Grace had chosen her side once again, the exact same way that we laid out at the beginning of the episode. And the thing is, I remember an interview with Nancy Grace after the Casey Anthony verdict came out, and she said very simply, "I believe she's guilty, therefore she is guilty." I'll never forget that. I'm pretty sure that's a 100% direct quote, not changing a single apostrophe or anything. I believe she's guilty, therefore she is guilty. And you can really see this type of prosecutor mindset going on with someone. And, it's not that I think Casey Anthony is just definitely innocent or something like that. It's just the thought process of someone who is a true crime presenter going into this by saying that they have chosen their side and they're going to play their side. And not only are they just like, it's not just like they're debating one side of the issue. No, I've chosen which side is right and I'm going to be right no matter what. That's the impression that I get from somebody like Nancy Grace, though. And perhaps in many cases that does more harm than good. The thing is, though, with Casey Anthony, it's like Nancy Grace isn't the only reason why we watched the Casey Anthony trial. We've done numerous episodes on Casey Anthony on this channel. The Casey Anthony trial is very similar to the O.J. Simpson trial in the sense that it's just a high-profile case that gets you very emotional. I couldn't stay away from the Casey Anthony stuff back in 2011 because it's just like you want to hear more because you just kind of have that hankering, lingering feeling that there's something there that you're missing, or you're not getting closure, or you just kind of have that feeling of dissatisfaction where you just need to know something more. And the people like Nancy Grace really capitalized on that because for years Nancy Grace was on Court TV, and there are even people out there that say Court TV was created because of O.J. Simpson. It's the same sort of model where it's like you're dealing with a very high-profile, intricate case that has a lot of details, and you just want to learn more about it. And some people like Nancy Grace can sensationalize that and blow it out of proportion. When it comes, though, to a lot of the cases, though, I think perhaps based on some personal experiences that Nancy Grace has had, she's probably a lot more sympathetic to many of the female individuals involved with this. Not Casey Anthony. That's the exception that proves the rule, okay? But even when you look at something like about what she said about Gypsy Rose Blanchard, like we mentioned, we kind of did an episode on Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her interactions with Nancy Grace. And what I thought about that one was that Nancy Grace was being very, very sympathetic to the concept of murdering Dee Dee Blanchard, who I'm sure was a horrible person. I didn't know her firsthand, but years and years of abusing her daughter in a horrendous way. But then it's just like all of the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard was committed by an individual named Nick Godejohn, who was the boyfriend partner of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And I mean, Nancy Grace is just like, he's the only one responsible. I mean, he's just like, she's hiding in the bathroom, even though it's just like Gypsy Rose Blanchard was perhaps the primary orchestrator of it all. So it's just like Nancy Grace really kind of gets into that kind of mindset about, no, the girl is innocent, she didn't do anything, the man is bad, and he did everything. What I would say, though, is to give a little bit of counterbalance, perhaps sometimes Nancy Grace's method is somewhat useful when she is challenging people who are in some very unethical situations, and some people who have perhaps done things, cases of negligence, cases of ignorant behavior, cases of maliciousness that have led to somebody's death. Then she's very good at kind of really highlighting the sort of a kind of ignorant nature of it all, about how this person made a very big mistake that led to somebody's death, and how this person is now responsible for that in a legal manner. I think she's good at things like that. But it's like, I would say, though, just kind of on a side note, this isn't really important or anything, but when I was just on her Wikipedia earlier today, I saw that Nancy Grace is only 59. I thought she was like 68 or 69 or something, and she was just wearing a lot of makeup and such. But I don't know. I mean, some people actually do look a lot older on television. Especially, you notice this if you're watching the daytime talk shows like Dr. Phil or Steve Wilkos or something. They'll be saying that the person is like 17, but they look like they're 24 or something like that. It's the makeup and the lights and such. That can make people appear a lot older. One of the things that I would say, though, is that Nancy Grace is also somebody who has an enormous amount of accusations about exaggerating some of the details from her past, exaggerating some of the problems that she experienced, and particularly surrounding the murder of her fiancé. I don't really want to get into too much to that, because I think that it's good to address that she perhaps did exaggerate the circumstances surrounding the death of her fiancé, which propelled her to a certain level of stardom. But at the same time, I don't think the exaggerations are so outrageous that it should mean the end of her career. If you want to end her career for something, say because she's not that good at commenting on true crime. She chooses her side, she plays her side, and then she just sticks with it until the end. I believe she's guilty, therefore she is guilty. That's not really the best thing. We want the truth. We can handle the truth. We do not want overly inflated opinions that do not connect to it. Until next time.